A look at what's making the front pages of papers across the world. Belle Lupton is back with us in studio. Hi again there, Belle. Palmyra once again dominating the headlines.
It certainly is, and it's getting a lot of attention in terms of strategy. So particularly the U.S. strategy. Here in France, Libération leads with an editorial in which it says that the Syrian army has lost all of its power. It fled in the face of what it calls IS's monsters. Libération makes rather a bold suggestion here that we can't rule out that Assad's forces may have actually deliberately left Palmyra in order to force the rest of the world to essentially kind of come to their aid. Could it be that Machiavellian? We don't really know. Libération says it's unbelievable that the US forces, who carried out a successful raid or commando operation in Syria quite recently, could have failed to have stopped the halt in Ramadi and in Palmyra. Obama, they say, seems unsure of his strategy in Syria. The only hope they say is that Palmyra will become sort of an electric shock for the Obama administration.
Okay, so that's what the French think about the American-led strategy. How about the Americans themselves?
It's not much better. The Washington Post has an editorial from Eugene Robinson, who asks, why should the US fight for Iraqis if they are not prepared to fight for themselves? So he points to those images of the Iraqis, the Iraqi army fleeing from IS, leaving behind working US-supplied tanks, artillery pieces, essentially just arming IS as they leave these things behind. He talks about the emptiness at the core of US policy, and says as well that to drive out IS from Ramadi, so now moving over to Iraq, to drive IS out from Ramadi, it won't be the regular army that does it. It will be the powerful Shi'ite militia units that are often armed and often also trained by Iran. So he imagines a situation where one day an Iranian general orchestrating an advance may actually call on the US for air support. Obviously a slightly strange image. US foreign policy makers, he says, want an intact, pluralistic and democratic Iraq, more, in fact, than most Iraqis do. So Robinson's not alone. This actually comes up, this same opinion comes up in the Daily Beast, an article by Nancy Youssef. She interviews some members of these Shiite militia and says that they say that Iraq's prime minister was actually under US pressure not to allow Shiite groups to intervene in Ramadi, which is why the town fell. So her line essentially is that Iraqis are now blamed for losing Ramadi. The Americans weren't the ones that ran away, she says, but they were the ones who held back those Iraqi reinforcements.
Indeed, a lot of people questioning that strategy to put Shiite militants into a Sunni area, predominantly Sunni area. Well, closer to home now, just over the channel, in fact, UK papers are talking about one thing pretty much. What's that?
Well, it's Cameron's whirlwind tour of Europe. So it's on the front pages of most of the papers here. The Times, here we go, the whirlwind EU tour, laying out Britain's terms for the UK to stay in Europe and seeking backing from other EU leaders for a series of reforms that Cameron wants to put through. So the British Prime Minister essentially kind of trying to gather support. The tabloid The Daily Express, another UK paper, goes with the sensationalist angle. We're actually seeing a different front page here. The front page that they actually had a couple of minutes ago was saying migrant numbers are out of control. Now, these were apparently Cameron's own words. He'd apparently said that migrant numbers of EU migrants going from one country to another in Europe have got completely out of control, as The Independent goes into more detail on, saying that migration is Cameron's red line in negotiations with the EU over various reforms it wants to see. It wants to reduce migration from the EU into the UK, pointing at figures recently. Apparently 86,000 EU nationals came to Britain looking for work rather than already having a job. So obviously Cameron says he's got that in-out referendum in 27. Could he bring it forward?
Okay, very, very quickly, Belle, the referendum in Ireland also getting some coverage.
It certainly is. This is a referendum on gay marriage. Ireland would become the 20th or about their country to do so. Le Monde says it's extraordinary that a country that is so Catholic could actually vote for gay marriage. We've got to remember that it was only in 1993 that homosexuality was decriminalised in Ireland. I mean, it's hardly believable. The Irish Independent very quickly also says that the youth are going to decide this vote. Hopefully that means for them in favour of gay marriage. The Australian has a very nice story just showing how these ripples are shown throughout the world of an Irish expat who came all the way over to Ireland to vote in the referendum today.
All the way from Australia, that is pretty impressive. Val Lupton there at the international papers, thanks indeed for that. Time